Are you deciding whether you should homeschool or send your child to private school? In this video, we're going to discuss the pros and cons for both homeschool and private school. Stay to the end for my thoughts on how to help you decide what is right for your family. My name is Coral from Relatable Homeschool Mom. Let's discuss private school pros first. I think one of the top private school pros is that built in socialization network for kids. Kids are experiencing life together at the same time. They're having the same milestones, they're having the same experiences. And so being able to be in a classroom full of other kids that are doing that as well is going to make the bonding experience for kids much easier and natural in a private school setting. The other pro is that there is a daily guaranteed routine. I think most kids thrive on a routine of some sort, and that routine in a private school is going to have that stability for kids to know what they need to expect every single day. And then in private school, there are so many different options for what you can choose. Anywhere from a Christian private school to Montessori schools to I've even seen forest schools, STEM schools. So just different types of focuses on those particular private schools really allows you to have options on what is going to be the best fit for your kids and your family with that private school option. Now, what are the cons in private school? The cons in private school is that it is not a flexible schedule. Whether or not your child needs to spend an hour or 2 hours, whatever the schedule that's allotted for, say, language arts, that is going to be the schedule that they have to stick to because they are ultimately working in the pacing of a teacher. Even in a private school that has a lower amount of student ratio, it's still going to be hard for them to fully optimize the flexibility of a schedule for the child. Now, there are some private schools that are going to be better at this. For example, a Montessori private school will have a better focus on that personalization for kids, but I still think that it's still never going to be as flexible as homeschool. And then also the pacing of the student. So again, this could really range on the private school that you choose, but a lot of private schools are still going to be very rigid in that schedule, and they're not going to allow as much of that personalization for kids that they could get in homeschool. So I would say that overall, the cons of private school is that it is not as flexible and it is not as personalized. The other con of private school is if you have multiple educational outcomes for your child, private school is going to feel restrictive. This is what happened to me. And I think in a way, this may be a con for me more than it is for a lot of people. But I wanted multiple opportunities for my kids to have a thriving education. So, for example, I want the Bible to be a foundation of my kids' education. That might make you think that you could just go to a private school that's a Christian-based private school. But the problem with a lot of the Christian-based private schools that I was looking at is that that is the only thing that they focused on. They had high academics and high Bible, but then they lacked in some of these other areas. So there was another private school not close by, but about 25 minutes away that was a Montessori dual language program that had Spanish immersion in it. I absolutely loved that school and even looked at it when I was pregnant with my son, but it wasn't Christian. So ultimately, it wasn't going to craft the exact experience that I wanted for my kids. Yes, they were going to get the Montessori, the dual language, which is very fancy, but it wasn't going to get the biblical foundation. And then, of course, the other con about private school is it is very expensive. And if you're like me, I do not live in a state with school vouchers for homeschool or private school. And so the price is a huge con, at least for me, although for a lot of states now, that is no longer as much of an issue. So let's discuss homeschool pros. The first thing is that the schedule and the curriculum is much more flexible in a homeschool setting. So in terms of the schedule, there is not a required time that you have to homeschool. So for example, maybe you want to have a nice day breakfast. You could spend some time together in the morning with your kids, doing some read aloud books, not rushing in the mornings. And then you can get started a little bit later in the day and get those core subjects done. You could also homeschool more in the weekends, in the summertime. There's really not a specific time that you have to adhere to in order to homeschool. The other thing is curriculum is much more flexible. When your child is in a private school, the curriculum has already been chosen for that school year. And it's a lot more difficult to change the curriculum for an entire classroom, especially if it's only not working for a couple of kids. Whereas in homeschool, if something is not working for your kid, it's not resonating with them, it's a lot easier to make a curriculum change in the middle of the year to fit the needs of your child. It also takes a lot less time to homeschool when it comes to those basics. I mean the core subjects, reading, writing, arithmetic. Those subjects don't take as long typically because you are working one-on-one with your child. And so you're really at the pace. It's very focused time with that child, and you're not having to wait on the pacing of multiple kids and make sure everybody is caught up. And of course, if you do have a child that is struggling, maybe it will take longer, but again, that's the benefit is you can spend longer on specific subjects if you need to. That comes back to the flexibility of homeschooling, but also most of the time it's going to take a lot less time to homeschool those core subjects, which means that it leaves a lot more options for other educational goals. So oftentimes when kids are younger, that means they have a lot more time for play and they're getting their childhood extended because they're going to have many more hours of playtime. And then as they get older, that also means that they're going to have more opportunities to pursue interests that they have that they wouldn't necessarily get to do during the school day. Are you getting a lot of value out of this video? If so, I invite you to subscribe for more homeschool tips and trends. The other thing is it is a fully customized education based on the desire of the parent and the child. Especially in the younger years, I want to have a specific education for my kids when they're younger. If I let them decide what they were going to do all day, it would only be studying superheroes. For me, it's important that I get to really customize it more based on my desire right now. But I already referenced earlier that I wanted a private school that was a Christian private school, but then I also loved this private school that was a Montessori Spanish language immersion private school. So for me, the way I can customize education for my kids is because I do have a background in Spanish, but even if you don't, there's curriculum out there that is focused on helping you all learn Spanish together, is that we can focus on Spanish multiple days a week. And so we can do that every single week, as well as we could do our Bible studies and discuss things from a biblical worldview. Another pro is that there's more time with your kids. And in my mind, it is more bonding time with the kids. Teaching kids is something that we do anyway. So adding academics can also be really fun. And I personally get really bored of the stuff that we have to do like after school. So if you're only lugging them to activities, making dinner, maybe you get to read a couple of fun books in the evening, but bath time, maybe even addressing some discipline issues, that to me just isn't as fun and inspiring as a parent. Whereas when you're homeschooling, you're involved in their life in so many more fun ways and exciting ways. For me, curriculum is extremely fun. I love getting curriculum and I love having something to do with the kids because it provides something valuable they're learning, but then it's also a fun way to spend your time. For example, I love doing geography with my son. He's loving it as well. So we read some books together and we're plotting different places on our big map. And to me, that is bonding time that I get to experience with my son in a way that's way more fun and motivating than bath time that I've done for his whole life. So I also like being able to see the spark when they reach new milestones that they haven't reached. So I don't know why it's okay to want the milestones of learning how to crawl, learning how to walk, taking those first steps. But then we don't get to see the milestones when they're learning math for the first time, when they're learning reading for the first time. And so I love being a part of that journey of really being able to see them learn from not just 0 to 5 years old, but also 5 years old and above. And finally, it's just a less rushed lifestyle. So you don't have to get up and just feel this immediate rush to get them out the door, get the clothes on, throw a lunchbox in their hand and wave goodbye at the door. And then in the evening, again, just feeling rushed, getting to activities, getting dinner and getting to bed. It's definitely a much slower pace of life that I personally love so much more than something that's super rushed. Now let's discuss homeschool cons. You do get less time for yourself as a mom because kids are home more. You don't necessarily get that break away from them. And I definitely think that could be difficult, especially depending on the kids that God has given us. Some kids are much more hyper, high energy, needy, dependent. And so that could make homeschooling more difficult, more stressful. I also think that quantity of time with kids doesn't necessarily equate to quality time. So maybe you do get more quantity with the kids, but if it's not quality time, then it's not necessarily better. I know many families that have a great experience with their kids because every single Saturday or every single Sunday, they have quality time with their family. And so that is going to be better than just quantity that's not quality. And the other thing is homeschool, you do have to be a lot more organized and accountable because you are in charge of your kids' education. It is going to be a little bit harder in that you are in charge of making sure they learn how to read and the math and all the subjects that they need to learn in order to grow up and be respectable citizens. And so you are responsible for that. And so that could be difficult, especially if you feel like your own life is a mess, then it could be difficult to help your kids in that way. And so I think that it is extremely important that you are accountable for a schedule that you are holding to. And then the final con is I would say socialization is not as natural. I'm definitely not going to say you can't socialize your kids in homeschool, but it's not as easy as just literally dropping them off at school where they're going to have a very natural socialized environment with peers. And so the socialization is going to be a little more work on the parent to make sure that you've involved in a co-op a couple days a week where they are working with other kids, or in an activity that actually brings socialization. So for example, I don't think sports is always the best activity for socialization in the younger years, because sometimes the kids do the sports and then they go home and they don't socialize with the friends. And so I do think that could be a con, that it is a little bit more work on the side of the parent to make sure that the kids are getting those extremely important friends that they want to have as the child. So which should you choose? Ultimately, I think it depends on your personal family situation, and that's not something I can personally answer. Psalm 37:23 says that the Lord directs the steps of the godly, so I do believe that listening to God when making these decisions is crucial. Even though I personally think homeschooling is best, obviously, private school may be right for you and your family. If you have a passionate career that you're called to, then don't feel bad in choosing an amazing private school that can provide an amazing education for your child. Or if you simply live near a private school that you love and think will be a great fit for your family, then go for it and don't feel bad about it. I do believe homeschooling is a calling. It's something that is laid on your heart to do because you know that the benefits far outweigh the hardships. I highly recommend this book, The Call of the Wild and Free. I love this quote from the book that says, "Imagine an education driven by passion instead of pressure." If you want to create an education for your child full of passion, freedom, and flexibility, I invite you to subscribe to my channel for more homeschool videos, and check out my video here about the curriculum I chose for my son's kindergarten year so you can start thinking about curriculum options for your own kids.